All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Torah Studies. It is great to be here with you. We have a very special class tonight, and I do want to mention that we have a few dedications that we'll mention. So number one, let me pull up the details. So Merle, I know you mentioned that your mom's yard site is Thursday night, but not everyone joining today is also Thursday night. So we'll mention it because it's the week and it's a few days before. So we're upcoming the first anniversary, the first yard site of Merle's mom, Florence Siegel. And so her neshama should have an aliyah, an ascent above, and be, as we say, a good to better, a good advocate on high on behalf of you and your husband and kids and the grandkids and the whole mishpacha, and only blessings and lots of gesund. And also, learning is dedicated in the merit of a refuah shlema from Merle's sister, Nomi Bat Ruth. Indeed, she should have good health and blessings, and Hashem's abundant blessings should only shine in a revealed way. Let us say Amen. Amen. Good to see you. All right, so tonight we have a very special Parsha class, very special Torah Studies class. The Torah portion we're going to cover is Pekudei. And right off the bat, part of what makes this Torah portion special is that it is the last Torah portion of the book of Shmos, the book of Exodus. So this is what we call Shabbat Chazak. It's the Shabbos that upon the conclusion of the Torah reading, we're all going to break out in song and say, well, I don't know if it's a song as much as it is a jingle, a little Torah jingle. Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek, be strong, and may we all be strengthened. And we wish each other that. And we literally, it's very interesting because, when it comes to blessings, good evening, Ramon. When it comes to blessings, we know that we're very particular about not interrupting the blessings. If you've ever been and ever hosted a Shabbos meal, and, after you wash the hands for the bread, new, right? Everyone's newing and eyeing because no one wants to talk, between the blessing over the washing of the hands and the eating of the motzi, of the bread. So we're very particular about blessings. When someone gets, by every Torah reading, someone gets called up to the Torah, and the person gets called up to the Torah, and they say a blessing, and then the reader reads it, and then upon the conclusion, the person that got the aliyah says a blessing to conclude it. By the way, back in the day, when you got called to the Torah, you read that portion. But since not everyone knows how to read the Torah, so now you get called up and someone else, there's a Torah reader who's like the profession. But back in the day, that's how it was. It reminds me of, when my sons were brist. I don't know if that's a verb, but maybe it is now. So the custom is that the mayal gives the dad the offer because it's really a mitzvah upon the father, or if not the father, then the mother. Moshe's wife, Tzipporah, she circumcised their son, so she was a mohelet, perhaps, if that's the correct gender term. But either way, the mitzvahs are coming on the father. So the mayal typically will ask the father, "Would you like to do the brit yourself, the bris yourself?" So regretfully, I had to decline. Because that's not happening. But it's like back in the day when you got called to the Torah, you read it. You got called up, you read the reading, and that was it. You said the bracha, you read it, and you closed it out. Nowadays we have, it's a two-party system. One person says the blessings, the other person reads it, and that's how it works. The point is, this Shabbos, at the end of the seventh reading, after the reader concludes the very last words of the book of Exodus, B'chol Maseyim, and all of their encampments, talks about the end of the portion, the end of the book of Exodus, talks about the cloud that was resting on the Mishkan, and by day, and the fire was resting by night, and that was a signal not to move. When the cloud cover was there, when the fire was there, they didn't travel. When it lifted, that meant to pack up and start moving. And you know what the Jews would say? Follow that cloud. I'm kidding. Like an old New York movie with a taxi cab chase. Follow that cab, right? Follow that cloud. It's lifted. That's where we're headed. The point is, the very last words talk about the cloud on the Mishkan, the cloud lifting from the Mishkan, etc. B'chol Maseim, in all their encampments, that is where the cloud rested. And then the entire congregation is going to break out. Chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek, be strong, and may we be strengthened. And then after that, the reader says, chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. The reader says, be strong, and may we be strengthened. Only then does the person who got the Aliyah, call to the Torah, does he recite the concluding blessing. Again, we don't typically throw in no cheers and chants. Go Braves. We don't usually do that. But when it comes, hey, Lucy, good to see you. But when it comes to chazak, we interrupt the reading to break out with chazak. Oh, you can yeah. So we interrupt chazak. We interrupt the reading, not interrupt. We append the reading with chazak. So it's a very special Shabbos, and it kind of culminates the entire book of Exodus. We've been reading it for 3 months. And as I've explained many times before, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, the first 6 portions are talking about pretty much the Egyptian experience, right? Slavery, plagues, freedom, and Torah. And the last 5 portions, by and large, are talking about Mishkan. 5 Torah portions for 1 building. It's a lot of Torah portions. If you think about it, the whole world took 37 verses. Right, the creation narrative, 37 verses. The Mishkan, hundreds of verses. I once heard a great idea on this. For God to make a world, easy. For us to create space for God, takes a lot of work, right? It's easier for God to create the entire universe than for you and I to create a little space for God. Verse after verse, how to do it, but we struggle with it. Be that as it may. One of the reasons why the narrative of the Mishkan is so expanded is because, as we'll see tonight, it's repeated 5 times. Now, exactly where the 5 times are, we're not going to get into tonight, but roughly speaking, we read about the Mishkan as God speaks to Moses, as Moses speaks to the builders, as the builders build it, and as the whole thing is recapped. I know that's 4, but there's other, like not the whole thing 5 times, but like different pieces of it are reiterated again and again and again from different perspectives. And the core question we're going to address tonight is, why the repetition? Why the repetition? Why so much elaboration? And I know I gave, an insight a few minutes ago about the fact that it takes, for us to create space for God, it's a big deal. But be that as it may, why is it repeated? Entire, mountains of halacha. If you study Gemara, if you study the Talmud, you have entire elements of Jewish law that are derived not even from a verse or even a word or even a letter, but the fact that 2 things are juxtaposed. Things are so subtle. Torah is so subtle, and yet when it comes to the Mishkan, the Torah spares no expense elaborating on it. And our question tonight is why. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to begin. David, if you don't mind, please get us started with text number 1. Text number 1 is, I would call a medley. It's kind of like a best of, and it contains, a variety of verses from the Torah portions of Vayakhel and Pekudei last week and this week that kind of express the elaboration and the repetition of the Mishkan experience. All right, if you don't mind. It's a long one.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking. And Moses spoke to the entire community of the children of Israel, saying, "This is the word that God has commanded to say. Take from yourselves an offering for God. Every generous-hearted person shall bring it, namely God's offering, gold, silver, and copper. And every wise-hearted person among you shall come and make everything that God has commanded. Betzalel and Oholiab, and every wise-hearted man into whom God has imbued wisdom and insight to know how to do, shall do all the work in the service of the holy, according to that God has commanded. Then all the wise-hearted people of the performers of the work made the Mishkan out of 10 curtains consisting of twisted fine linen and blue, purple, and crimson wool. A cherubim design, the work of a master weaver, he made them. And then he made curtains of goat hair for a tent over the Mishkan, and he made them 11 curtains. And he made the planks for the Mishkan of acacia wood, upright.
But wait, there's more.
And he made the dividing curtain of blue, purple, and crimson wool, and twisted fine linen, the work of a master weaver he made it, in a woven cherubim design. Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, a cubit and a half wide, and a cubit and a half high. And he made a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, 1 cubit wide, and a cubit and a half high. And he made the menorah of pure gold, of hammered work he made the menorah, its base and its stem, its goblets, its knobs, and its flowers were all one piece with it. And he made the incense altar out of acacia wood, 1 cubit long, 1 cubit wide, square, and 2 cubits high. Its horns were one piece with it. And he made the altar for the burnt offering of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. The altar was square, and it was 3 cubits high. And he made the courtyard on the southern side. There were hangings for the courtyard of twisted fine linen, 100 cubits. These are the numbers of the Mishkan of the testimony, which were counted at Moses' command. This was the work of the Levites under the direction of Itamar, the son of Aaron the Kohen. And out of the blue, purple, and crimson wool, they made the meshwork garments to serve in the holy. And they made Aaron's holy garments as the Lord had commanded Moses. All the work of the Mishkan of the tent of meeting was completed. The children of Israel had done it according to all that God had commanded Moses, so they had done.
All right, now you deserve a drink, a cookie.
This is almost like reading the Haggadah.
It is almost like the Haggadah. You're right. By the way, once you start getting into the one rabbi says there were 4 plagues for each plague. One rabbi says there were 5 plagues for each plague. Now the fact that there were 10 plagues, okay, once you start getting into those numbers, everyone's eyes like kind of like, when are we breaking out the matzah? Like, what's going on? Okay, here's the point. This was just a very brief sampling of literally, I don't know the full number, but it's over 200 verses. It's a lot of verses between 5 Torah portions, well over a few hundred verses. I mean, Vayakel, Vayakel, Truma Tetzava, half of Kisisa until it gets to the golden calf, and Vayakel Pekudei. And they're all circling around the same theme. Now, yeah, not everything is literally a repeat. Obviously, like it's got to say it once. But the core question, and this is not an original question. All of the commentaries have the same question. The question is very simple. And this is phraseology that the Torah uses very often. It even uses it at the end. I mean, what was that last verse that you read, David? Right? The last verse said, hold on, the children of Israel had done it according to all that God had commanded Moses. So they had done. I have an idea. Like if we're in the editor's room, I have a suggestion. Why not just say one time how it was supposed to be made, and then just conclude? Well, maybe 2 other verses. Moses communicated everything, and everyone built and the children of Israel built it as God had commanded.
Couldn't they have just put a blueprint right in the middle? You know,
that would actually be interesting. As you lift up the Torah, beautiful. That's amazing. And it's like, imagine like a 3D thing that as you turn it with the Hagba, it's like it comes out at you, and you need special glasses. Oh my gosh! Someone get on this. This is
well, nowadays to build a building, that's what they do is they give the contractor a bunch of drawings.
There's like the new plans for this. It's like in the office. There's like this 3D model. Very cool. I just saw it walking in there to grab the plates. Anyway, there's gonna be there's plans for a bit of an update. Yeah. If anybody wants to see the thing, there's I hope I'm not leaking private info, but it was right there.
All right. I want to expand this and turn it into a second sanctuary for this jewel.
Yeah, it's gonna move. It's gonna move back a little bit. Yeah. All right, it's nice. All right. Bottom line, what's the point of all this? Why the elaboration? Why the repetition? I think it's the Abarbanel Yeah, Barbanel.
But was each one at a different parlor meeting for raising the money to do the construction?
Ah, that could be triple dipping now. The main question is like, what is the story with the repetition? Text number 2. Here we have the Barbanel. There was a band in the 80s, 90s, maybe 90s called Schlock Rock.
I remember.
Remember Schlock Rock?
Yeah.
They would take like tunes and make kind of silly Jewish lyrics. Ba ba Bernal, ba 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 Bernal, ba ba ba. Barbanel, we think you're swell. That was literally the lyrics of the Barbanel song.
That was Lenny Solomon.
Lenny Solomon. Oh my gosh, blast from the past. Lenny Solomon was the guy. I wonder where he is today. All right, Ramon, please read text number 2, page 1. Hold on, 161. Let me share this, and we are good. Question.
Question: why is the information about the building of the Mishkan repeated again and again? The Torah tells us about the Mishkan and its vessel 5 times, sometimes in a brief summary and other times in full detail. The question is most acute in these Torah portions. First, Moses tells the Jewish people, "Every wise-hearted person among you shall come and make everything that God has commanded." And the verses go on to list all the things they were commanded to build. Then the Torah goes on to describe the actual construction of every individual element in full detail. It should have been enough for the Torah to state, and Moses related to all of the children of Israel all of the work God had instructed him about, and then all of the wise-hearted people did as Moses had commanded. What is the need to relate the details again and again?
There you go. I want to share with you a few answers. Actually, hold on. Yeah, do it right now. I'll share with you an answer. An answer that I love goes like this. There's 2 different Mishkans. One Mishkan is the way God envisions it. The other Mishkan is the way we build it. Think about it. You imagine the Mishkan that God imagined? Perfect. Everything perfect. Imagine the Mishkan the way humans built it? Almost perfect. Is a human being perfect? Is anything we make absolutely as perfect as God? No. So there's 2 Mishkans. There's the vision of the Mishkan and then the actual Mishkan. Think about anything in life. Think about a project, a relationship. There's the way that you imagine it when you're thinking about what it's going to be. And then there's the way that it actually is, right? Sometimes it's very different, right? When you're taking, I don't know, when you're playing baseball as a kid in Little League or whatever it is, there's the way you imagine you're going to hit the home run, bottom of the 9th inning, bases loaded, 7th game. And then there's the actual strikeout that might happen when you're up there in real time, right? It's not the same. The vision and the implementation, there's always a gap. That's true with human beings, let alone when it comes, that's a person's imperfect vision and a person's imperfect implementation. There's still a gulf between them, let alone when you're talking about God's perfect vision and the human being's imperfect implementation. It's kind of like Platonic forms, right? Plato, the great, not Play-Doh, that's totally different vibe, but Plato, right? The philosopher. See, he has this idea that there are certain forms or templates of perfection, of beauty, like a tree. It's like you go outside, Atlanta, especially Atlanta, right? Tons of trees. That's a tree, and that's a tree. I'm not literally pointing to trees, but that's a tree, that's a tree, that's a tree. You ask a question. Well, hold on, they look different. How are they both trees? How are they all trees? So he has this concept. He says there is a perfect tree. There's the form, a perfect form of a tree. And then you have flawed replicas. Where this perfect tree is, it doesn't mean it's necessarily like an actual perfect tree, but the concept. There is a concept of tree. And then all of these things that pretty much match up tree, all right, we'll also call it a tree, even though it's not perfection. He talks about how perfection lies in the perfect form, whereas everything else is flawed. And so one idea of the repetition is to teach us and remind us that Judaism does not believe the same thing vis-a-vis God's vision and our implementation. Torah is not about reminding us how small and flawed and imperfect we are. On the contrary, the fact that the Torah repeats all of the details about our construction means that not only is God's vision valuable to iterate, but to go through, but also our imperfect implementation is also valuable, because at the end of the day, even though it's not perfect, but it's the way we build a home for Hashem. God is not demanding of us perfection, the standard of perfection. God recognizes the imperfection of the human being and asks just that we put in our best effort. And that's what brings heaven down to earth. In other words, when does the Shekhinah, when does the divine presence actually come down to earth? Not in the Mishkan of vision, in the Mishkan of implementation. And so we think about this in our lives, and we think about all the things that didn't work out exactly the way we had planned. When we were thinking about our lives and we were 18 years old, what is my life going to look like? What are my relationships going to look like? What's my career going to look like? And maybe it matches, but most probably it doesn't. And the question is there divinity in the imperfection? And the Torah says yes. And to drill that message home, we have another entire iteration of Mishkan, of the human Mishkan. We have the template of the perfect Mishkan, God's Mishkan. Great. That's easy for God. And then we have the imperfect Mishkan of our creation. But that's also holy. It's also valid. And not only also, it's the primary Mishkan, is the one that we actually built. Not the one that God envisioned, but the one we actually built. That's probably not 100% perfect. If you measured it, maybe a millimeter off.
So when you look at the descriptions, do you see a difference in the descriptions?
No, you don't see a difference. But the point is, it's still, they did it per the specs. I mean, think about it. Think about like even something that runs off of an assembly line, right? The same assembly line, the same robots that are putting together. You look at an iPhone. You really, I mean, my God, you want to have fun? Go on to Reddit, right? After the release of a new iPhone and look at the complaints. Oh, my screen, there's a pixel here. The light's bleeding at the edge of the thing. It's a millimeter off. The metal is not lined up. You want to amplify that even more? Buy a Cybertruck. I'm not saying to actually buy a Cybertruck, right? Oh my gosh, the things don't line up. Even things that roll off a line are not perfect. The metal, the gaps, whatever, it's all this stuff. What's the point? Human beings can never get anything perfect. But God says it's still Torah worthy. It's still worthy of having an entire additional mention in the Torah. That's one answer.
So I feel like that explains 2 iterations, but it doesn't explain 5 iterations.
Yeah. So the truth is, honestly, I didn't look at the original. I'm not sure where the 5 are because we don't have 5 in our. We have as God tells Moses, Moses tells Bezalel, and as they build it. And then maybe a quick recap. But like, you don't have 5 full iterations. He says 5, but partial. Maybe he's referring to not in these portions, but later on, like in Leviticus or Numbers, where Vayikra or Bamidbar, where it kind of like goes over some of the details again. But in this Torah portion, you mainly have 2 major iterations. One, the way God tells Moshe, and one, the way we built it. Yeah.
In each time, the Israel was spiritually different, and so their instruction was different.
Interesting. So you're saying we were on different levels, and so it was a different experience. I love that also. Good. Granting holiness to our experiences and to our difference. That's one answer. There are many answers that are given. This is more, I gave more of a, I don't know, like a symbolic or spiritual answer. Something that, like I would say the answer that I gave is like drush with a little chassidus, with a little Kabbalah, like a little bit of that mixed in. Great, it's a feel-good answer. But here's the key. Today, because you know what we do here, it's not just Torah study. This year, it's Rashi. Rashi focused. Rashi doesn't go midrashic. Typically, if he does, we want to know why. Rashi typically gives us pshat. And in this situation, we have a major question. Rashi doesn't ask this question? And that itself is super questionable. Why doesn't Rashi ask this question? Why did Barbanel ask the question? Other commentators ask the question. They answer the question. Rashi, totally silent. Radio silence on this whole conversation. He doesn't ask the question, doesn't answer the question. And our question is, why not? Listen, if our question was only why the repetition, we got dozens of answers. Our question tonight is not why the repetition. It's why doesn't Rashi address the repetition? That's a problem. Now take a look at Rashi. There's a very interesting Rashi. Dasi, read this one, text number 3, but let me give a little bit of background before you read text 3. Text 3 is the beginning of last week's Torah portion, as kind of the Torah is gearing up for this major repetition. And Rashi explains a phrase that's used, and then he gives a disclaimer. Please read text 3.
Every generous-hearted person, because his or her heart motivated them to be generous, they are called generous-hearted. I have already explained the account of the contributions to the Mishkan and the details of its construction and the passages where the instructions were given.
Okay, let's break this down into 2 parts. Part 1 is where Rashi explains the phrase, every generous-hearted person. The reason why there's a hyphen is because in the Hebrew, it's nediv libo. Now that's weird. I'll be honest. It's a bit of a weird or a strange expression. It should have just said nediv, generous. Why nediv libo? Why generous-hearted? So Rashi says, why generous-hearted? Because what motivates generosity? The heart. So generous-hearted means, as Rashi says, because his or her heart motivated them to be generous, they're called generous-hearted. Meaning, where does generosity come from? The heart. Good. And then Rashi makes a disclaimer. And you know what he basically says in the second half of this Rashi? You won't be seeing much of me for the next 2 Torah portions. That's what he says. If you notice that I'm going to check out, there's a reason for it. Why? He says, Kvar pirashti. I already explained before. In Vayaka Pekudei. As we saw God telling Moses what to build and how to build it, I explained it there. I'm not going to bother repeating my commentary over here to explain again when they actually built it. 1 second. That means that Rashi is aware of the repetition. He's even aware of the fact that he doesn't need to comment again. Why doesn't he ask the simple question? So why did the Torah have to repeat it? He himself is not going to repeat his commentary twice. You with me on this? On the irony? He himself is not going to write the same commentary twice, but the Torah writes the same story twice. And that's not a problem. He doesn't address it. What's going on over here? You with me on the question?
Mhm.
Another question. What a weird Rashi. He starts off explaining generous-hearted because generosity comes from the heart. Okay, cool. And then he's like, oh, and by the way, I'm not going to comment so much here because I already said it before. Why is that disclaimer on this in the same Rashi? Now, maybe you're thinking, well, where else should he have written it? And the truth is, my answer is, I don't know. But I'm sure he could have figured it out. Maybe he could have made a general header on the Torah portion, on like last week's Vayakel, and said like, FYI, a lot of this over the next 2 weeks is going to, next 2 portions are going to be repetitive. Not going to be so much commentary. I mean, honestly, you could think of many different ways that he could have written it. Why is it specifically under this comment about wise-hearted that he throws in the old Kvar Pirashi already explained this stuff?
It's almost as if he feels like we're gonna read it and think it's a big deal, and he's like it's not really like all that big. Like I've already explained it like before. You don't really have to ask me.
But again, if he doesn't feel that, right, I hear what you're saying, but if he doesn't feel the need to repeat his commentary, then why does the Torah feel the need to repeat it? But but to that question, we have tons of answers. But again, more importantly, Rashi is supposed to address all of the questions that come up. This is definitely a question that comes up. If you're the 5-year-old studying Torah, at some point you're going to be like, this sounds very familiar. And we could have just said they did it. What are we doing? Rashi even checked out. He's like, see you later. I'm out. I'm not doing this again. Why are we doing this again? Why doesn't he explain it to the student why we're doing it again? It's a really big question.
He probably got bored with the details.
We also get bored with the details. If he got bored with the details, we're getting bored with the details. Again, he checked out. He's like, all right, I'm out.
Right.
I already did this. So why are we doing it again? Okay, good. So the crux of the answer that we're going to give is the following. It's a very important point. And it all goes back to the story that we're studying, which is the story of the building of the Mishkan. The building of the Mishkan was not just one mitzvah. Well, first of all, it included many mitzvahs, because like to build the menorah is a mitzvah, to build the altar is a mitzvah. Aside from that, it's not just a mitzvah. It's a key mitzvah. It's a central mitzvah. Take a look at text number 4. Well, please read text number 4. Here's where the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, explains a little bit about the significance of the Mishkan. Please take it away. Next
The
one.
function of the Mishkan was to facilitate God's presence dwelling among the Jewish people, as the verse states, and they shall make me a Mishkan, and I will dwell among them. The sages often spoke of this when they said God desired to have a home for himself in the lower realms. The question is that the verse states that regardless of all of this, I, God, built the heavens and the earth. So what added purpose did the Mishkan serve?
So hold on, before you continue, I just want to explain the question. It's a fast. I'm sure you guys caught it, but I just want to make sure that it's emphasized. The purpose of the Mishkan was to create a space for God to be found here on earth. Well, that's weird, because the Torah, the scripture says that God is everywhere. So even without a Mishkan, right, God fills the heavens and the earth. So what do you need a Mishkan for? This is not a small question. This is a really big question, right? Build me a home and that's where I'll be. And if not, what, you're checked out? Like, what does that mean? All right, so let's continue. So here's how he explains it. Next page.
The answer is that a home means a place where godliness is revealed. This must be specifically in the lower realms. Lower here doesn't mean a lower place in the physical sense, because God is beyond the limitations of space. In this context, higher and lower refer to their spiritual level. Our lowly world is spiritually the lowest of all, final link in the chain of worlds. This is why godliness is heavily concealed in this world and is filled with darkness. God desired to dwell and reveal himself specifically in this world and illuminate its darkness.
Thank you. This is such a beautiful text. So we went through the question. What's the answer? Higher, lower, but not low physically, low spiritually. What is he saying? I'll give you the upshot of the answer. The upshot of the answer is God is everywhere,
Right.
but you can't see God everywhere. And God wanted to make a space specifically in a world of concealment where there will be a window of truth to the truth of God. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between heaven and earth? Right? God is equally in both, but not equally obviously revealed in both. In heaven, God's revealed. It's obvious. If you and I are floating around in heaven, we would know about God. But here on earth, I don't know. God, I don't know, it's weird. Did he have a reservation? We don't have a table. Like God, where's God? I don't see God. I mean, you and I can meditate on. Oh, just came in.
Yes, God.
Perfect timing. So, where's God? We don't see God. In heaven, God is apparent. On earth, God is not apparent. So what's the Mishkan? The Mishkan serves as a portal, or as a almost like I'm trying to think of what's a good example. It's like when you look at the Mishkan, you see through to the other side. You see through to the ultimate truth. You see the reality of God on a very basic level. It says in Pirkei Avot that every day in the temple and in the Mishkan, there were 10 miracles that occurred. So if you walked into that space, you were walking to like a slice of heaven. That's what God means when he says, make for me a Mishkan, make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell there. What, you're not here otherwise? He is here. But this is going to be a space where you can see him. And it's not meant, the message is not meant to be isolated to the space. We're meant to be inspired about the reality of God in this space and then share the light and expand it to the rest of the world. The whole purpose of life. Why was our souls sent to this world? To do this, to make God's reality apparent even in this world, even in this lowly space. God is already obviously apparent in heaven. It's about making that transformation right there. That's what it means to make a home for God on earth. That's what the Mishkan was about. That's what we continue to do. Every time we do a mitzvah, what we say is, God is real. Let me show you. Right? God is in my life. God is in the world. It's not just a piece of leather. It's a pair of tefillin. It's not just a sandwich. It's a kosher sandwich, right? That's giving me energy to do a mitzvah. This is how we create, like, I almost have like a vision of I don't know, like this portal where when you like look at it, you see, like, otherwise you would see like this reality, this world. But when you look into that window, you see to the other side. That's what the Mishkan was. You looked inside there. You didn't see more world. Oh, another building, another structure, another edifice, another wall, another floor, another. You didn't see that. You saw Hashem. You saw divinity. You saw spirituality. You saw godliness.
Allison in the Looking Glass.
Oh,
I was
Alice in the
gonna
Looking
say
Glass.
Wonka vision.
Wonka vision. All right. Makes sense?
Would a different explanation be the difference in a house and a home?
Mm,
A house is just a physical structure where people live, and
right.
and a home
Where you
has-
feel comfortable. Yeah, I love that. I love that. God is everywhere, but he's not at home everywhere.
right.
We're making God at home.
He may be in your house, but he's not in your
He's
home.
not in your home. Good. I like that. I like that. Either way, I love that. Either way, what's the point? The Mishkan was a special place. Very special place. All right, let's take a look at text number. But you know what? Let's skip text 5. What's the point of this? The point is the Mishkan is very special. Last week in our Vayako class, if you recall, 1 week ago tonight, I asked the question, why is it that Moses starts his Mishkan communication with the Jewish people by first prefacing Shabbos? And we explained last week, because since the Mishkan was going to be so important to the Jewish people, they might think like, we got to work 24/7 on this. So Moshe had to say, hold on, before we even get started with this, let me tell you, Shabbos is Shabbos. Right? Like John Goodman said once in Big Lebowski, thank you. Thank you. I don't roll on Shabbos, right? And by rolling, I mean build a Mishkan or anything. By the way, still one of the most iconically Jewish lines. This is not vouching for the movie, I don't know, right? But Big Lebowski, Hollywood film. He's invited to bowl on Shabbos. He's like, I don't bowl on Shabbos. That's it. He says Shabbos. Doesn't even go with the Shabbat or Sabbath. He just, I don't bowl on Shabbos. That's it. All right. What's the point? The point is that the Mishkan was very important because it symbolized the forgiveness of the Jewish people. Text number 6, mirror. Text number 6, page 166. Hold on 1 second. Let me pull this up.
Not 5.
No, we're skipping 5. 5 is too long. And we already got the theme. We already got the theme. Of
1
5.
wasn't too long.
No, 1 was very long.
The Mishkan of the Testimony. The edifice of the Mishkan testified to the Jews that God had forgiven them for the construction of the golden calf, because his presence was now dwelling among them.
So the Mishkan was a space for God to be at home in this earth. The Mishkan was testimony that God had forgiven the Jewish people. The Mishkan was such a special place. Now we understand why. The Torah repeats the Mishkan again and again and again, as God tells it to Moses, as Moses tells it to the builders, as the builders build it. We read about it again and again and again. Why? Because when something is important, you can't stop talking about it, right? When something's important to you, what do? You tell everybody you know, right? Have I told you guys about Bitcoin? I'm kidding, right? Like if you're excited about something, everybody knows that you're excited about it. You don't keep it to yourself. Let's take a read. Lucy, please read text number 7.
The Mishkan and its vessels were of critical importance to the Jewish people, and they facilitated the dwelling of the divine presence among the Jewish people. This explains the great fondness both God and the Jewish people had for the Mishkan, and this is the reason why the Torah lists all of the elements of the Mishkan again and again in great detail.
Thank you. In other words, if we have a question in Pshat, this is not going to be Kabbalah, it's not going to be Medrash, it's not going to be Remez, it's not going to be anything mystical or highfalutin. This is going to be a very simple understanding of why the repetition of all the verses. If you want to know a very simple answer to the very simple question, why the repetition? The answer is because it was so precious, because it was so dear. You repeat the things that are so important. But that still doesn't really answer the question, because our question is not about so much about the repetitions, but how come Rashi doesn't address it? Well, by now, it's been months. It's been almost 6 months since we started this exploration of Rashi. And I imagine that at this point, you probably know the rule. The rule is if Rashi doesn't comment, either it's so obvious that we would know it on our own, or what's the other option? Oh, that is one answer, but what else?
He's already taught it.
He's already taught it to us. And now we understand that if you recall in the book of Genesis, that's like a book ago. Yeah, the book of Genesis, Rashi already answered our question. When? Okay. Do you remember the story of Eliezer, the servant of Avram, finding a wife for Yitzchak, the son of Avram? Remember, he says, because he doesn't want his son to leave the land of Israel because he was brought up as a sacrifice, even though he was brought down, but he became holy. He can't leave Israel, right? Yeah, so find the girl from back home. We had a class on this. Why Avram had to go there. Remember that was a great class, if I recall correctly. Good. If YouTube were the reality, we would have it pop up over here. For that class. Anyway, so in that narrative, we read about the story of Eliezer a few times. We read it as it's unfolding. Eliezer goes. He doesn't know where to go. He davens to Hashem. He says, please, give me a sign, make me successful. And it all works out. And he meets a girl. And then he goes over to her house, meets the parents. And he says, you'll never guess what happened. And he tells the story again. We have the same story as it happened and as Eliezer repeats it. And the question is, why the repetition? Sounds familiar? And Rashi gave an answer. Take a look at the answer of Rashi. Toba, this is you. Please read text number 8. Rashi on Genesis 24.
Rabbi Aha said, the conversation of the patriarch's servants is held in higher esteem by God than the Torah discourses of their children. This is evidenced by the fact that the story of Eliezer is repeated in the Torah, whereas many principles of the Torah were given only through allusions in the text.
It's a fascinating Rashi. What does he say? He says, the stories, the conversation, it really means the story. All right, story conversations of the patriarch's servants are held in higher esteem than the Torah discourses of their children. Now, you could say that the reason is because the patriarchs, wow, even their servants were better than the children of Israel. That's one way to read it. Or you could read it that stories are sometimes held in greater esteem than even the laws themselves. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to stories versus laws, even when the stories are of the servants and the laws are of the people, stories not override, but stories sometimes are more elaborate than even the laws themselves. What does it mean? What does it mean? Because when it's a special story, when it's an exciting story, you want to hear it again. You know what kids tell their parents by bedtime? Can you read me that story? And you're thinking as a parent, don't you know the ending? Right? I read it to you last night and the night before. And you know what it is? It's not about a surprise ending. It's not about a novel twist of the story. It's not about the surprise. No, it's very simple. You like the stories that you like, and you want to hear it again. It's some things you just want to hear again and again and again. As adults, we're probably not going to read the same book again. I mean, some books maybe, but maybe when it comes to music, we'll hear the same songs again, right? When it comes to certain things, you'll hear it again. Some movies, right? Select movies. But certainly when we were kids, the stories that we loved, you wanted to hear again and again and again, whether you're reading, whether you remember as a kid or you remember, or your children or your grandchildren or whatever it is, a friend, you know that there's stories that you like hearing, you like telling again and again. Hey, listen, if you've ever been around me for a few minutes, you'll hear the same jokes, the same stories, right? Everyone, oh my gosh, everyone nodded.
No, I'm just thinking about what Eve says about.
Thought you'd be like, no, everything's original. Never heard this before. What? The first time. Oh my God. All right, fine.
Here today.
But listen, exactly. Look, the reality is that there's certain things that we love talking about. Why? Because it's exciting. We're passionate about it. It's meaningful. So we tell the stories. Eliezer's story was incredible. Here's a guy looking for a wife for Avram's son, Yitzhak. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know who. He doesn't have any instructions. Just not from here. Find someone from there. So he goes there. So he says to God, let's make a sign. If I ask for water, and she said, not only for you, but also for your camels, that'll be the one. And then he arrives at a well and he says, some water, not only for you, but for your camels. You got to be kidding me.
No.
You got to be kidding me. It worked. Who doesn't want to hear that story again? Give it to me again. Oh, you want to tell me the laws of tithing your crops? Listen, once is fine. We'll even figure it out from a letter. We'll figure it out. Not that we're not going to study it. We'll study it and we'll understand it. We'll write books about it also, codes of law about it. Sure. But what's exciting? It's the stories. It's the narratives. Think about it. I mean, I can only speak for myself. Like the Eliezer story, great story. The Joseph story, unbelievable. The Exodus story, fantastic. The Torah says I got one more story. Not only one, but I got another story for you. Story of the Mishkan. It's a really cool story. And you're like, it's very detailed. If I were an architect, maybe we'll get really excited about the repetition. It's like, oh my gosh, I failed to see the half a cubit in the first time. Oh, I didn't realize it was 3.5 cubits. It's the story of second chances. It's the story of creating a space for God in our lives, in our community, on earth. That's a big deal. It's a great story. Don't get bogged down in the details, even though the details are the ones that are repeated the second time. The story is about the larger drama. It's about creating space for God. It's about creating that space. How come Rashi doesn't talk about it? Why would he have to? He already told us before in the book of Genesis, a book ago, all the way there. He says sometimes the Torah will repeat a story when it's really cool. He already told you that. Doesn't need to tell it to you again. What does he say? He says, I'm not going to comment on it. Well, that's valid. That's fair. Remember I asked the question, why does he comment on that in a weird, why in that Rashi? Look what that Rashi says. Let's go back to text. I think it's text 3. Look at this. Look at this Rashi. Where did Rashi tell us that he's going to not be so present? It was text 3. Right? Look at Rashi, Taxes 35:5. First, he comments on the phrase Nediv Libo, every generous-hearted person, because his or her heart motivated them to be generous. They're called generous-hearted. And then Rashi says, I'm not going to talk about it I'm not going to comment because I already explained it before. And I asked the question, why there? Everything about Rashi is precise. Even this juxtaposition. What is Rashi trying to allude to us? Trying to allude to us. Why? Not why he's not commenting. We know why he's not commenting. But why does the Torah repeat it? Because of the heart. Generous-hearted person. Because this story has a lot of heart to it. The story is deeply emotional. The story is deeply impactful. Not only are we in it for the Eliezer stories and the Joseph story and the Pharaoh Moses, showdown at the Nile story. That's not the only stories that we're into. We're also into the stories that speak about second chances and how when you've messed up, when it seems like you have broken the relationship, and the literal representation of the relationship in the tablets is smashed and shattered on the ground, and you think it's over, right? Remember that song? It must have been love. It's over now. Can't really sing about this, like the song, right? What's the point? Even when you think it's over, there's still a second chance. You can still create your dream home together with your beloved God. You can still make it happen. It's not too late. Isn't that a story worth repeating? Huh? What about the fact that a human being, a frail, flawed human being with imperfect materials, with imperfection flowing through their very DNA, an imperfect human being can create a home space for God on earth? That's a story worth telling. It's like TED Talks, ideas worth sharing, right? These are stories worth sharing again and again and again. So Rashi in Genesis told us, Rashi in Bereshit told us that when it's a cool story, when it's an important story, you might get it twice. Rashi in our context in the book of Exodus toward the end says, FYI, generous-hearted, right? He's like winking to us, like, hearted. You see what I did there? Generous-hearted. Generosity comes from the heart. Emotional excitement. Boom. That's why it's repeated. It's repeated here because it's emotional, because it's real. My friends, text number 10. I'll read this. Text number 10. Because the takeaway message, one second, before we start this. The takeaway message we're going to share is that in life, it's important to be passionate about things. It's important to care. It's not only important to actually, do what needs to be done. It's important to be passionate about it. Take a look at text number 10 in your books. I'm pulling it up on the screen as well. Everyone gets animated and excited about something. Some people are into sports, avidly following their team and screaming with excitement when they win the Super Bowl. Others get excited about money, while still others are passionate about art, boring everyone around them with long discussions about the beauty of this painting and the finesse of that sculpture. I don't know. Art is kind of cool. All right. Everyone has something they're excited about. So if your sports passion is red hot, but your Judaism is pale white, that's a problem. If you get excited discussing politics with your friends, but you're dragging your feet to shul or dreading a Shabbos meal with your family, then your Judaism is pale and it runs the risk of sputtering and dying out. The spiritual life of your soul and its connection to God is something worth getting excited about. So don't let the Yankees get all your red hot passion. Leave some of that for your Judaism as well. I love that. I love that. Isn't that great? Isn't that a great line? What's the point? I noticed this at the school the other day. Last Friday, they had a teacher-student basketball game. In honor of March Madness. They have a thing called March Madness. They do like a whole math competition. And then I guess part of that, they had an actual basketball game. They had a boys game, the boys and the teachers. They had a girls game, girls and the teachers. And Rabbi Rahmani is here, and he was like an MVP on his team. And it's like, it's great. You should see the passion. Oh my gosh. There's announcers on the side with megaphones and microphones and cheering, and there's halftime, and the whole place is excited. So I turned to Rabbi Edelman. I said, how do we get this type of excitement about Torah? Like, how do we get a Torah equivalent? You know what he told me? Not happening. I'll tell you this. The answer is not, it's not happening. The answer is, it could happen, but it takes a little bit of work. The Berditchev Rabbi once said, he turned to God and said, God, you put all the physical delights in front of our eyes and all the spiritual stuff in the books. And then you wonder why, we mess up. If you would have reversed it, if you would put all the spiritual stuff in front of us and all the physical stuff in the books, we would all be spiritual. So look, the honest truth is the deck is stacked against us. I don't mean that in a woe is to us, we're victims. I don't mean that. But it's hard. It's a challenge. It's easier to get excited about a basketball game than it is to get excited about studying Gemara or whatever, going to shul. It's easier. But it doesn't mean it can't be exciting, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be passionate about it. What's the message of today? What's today's message? The message is building a home for God is exciting. It's so exciting, we read about it twice, or like the Barbanel said, maybe even 5 times, because it's so exciting. And the question for you and I, the question we have to ask ourselves, or that you don't have to, the question that we're encouraged to ask ourselves is a very simple question. When we build our home for God in our lives, when we build our Mishkan for God, how exciting is it for us? Are we excited about it, or we just do it? Look, if we're not excited, we should just do it, right? But we should be excited about it. It should be something that we talk about. Hey, I'm coming to Shul Shabbos. I'm going to Shul Shabbos. Why don't you come along? Hey, I'm doing Shabbos lunch. Come on over. It should be exciting, right? I have a Seder. I got some matzah, right? Come on over. I got some mar of this bitter herbs. Oh, I got the best horseradish in the South. This should be what gets us excited. This should be what we talk about to our friends. Look, we also going to talk about sports or whatever our thing is. Certainly, we're not going to stop being human. But let's also make Judaism, spirituality, godliness, Hashem, let's make that an exciting part of our lives. Can't fake it. Either it is exciting or it's not exciting. So let's get excited about the spiritual stuff. It's a good thing. All right. Make sense? That's it for tonight. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. All right. So that is this week's class. Next week, we are going to focus on the opening of the book of Leviticus. The opening portion of the book of Leviticus, which is Vayikra. And then after that, hold on, let me just double check. Vayikra is next week. And then after that, we have a special Passover class in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from tonight, it's our special Passover class, which we also call Passover Boot Camp. Again, always try to avoid the confusion, but I also create the confusion. So there you go. The Wednesday Torah Studies is the same as the boot camp. It's just got 2 different names to bring new people in. That's the story. Questions, comments? Make sense?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the story of Bereshit repeated?
The creation, yeah.
So does Rashi talk about why that?
It's interesting. It's a good question. But it's repeated not day by day.
I know.
There are elements that are repeated, but even as they're repeated, there's different twists to it.
Right. And there's different.
What Rashi is doing, he's commenting where it's pretty much the same narrative twice.
Okay.
So the story of creation, there are 2, I would say it's not repeated, but there's really 2 versions almost.
Right. That's what I thought. Yeah, that's what
Now, there is another time, think about it, where something is repeated pretty much word for word, the 10 Commandments. But that makes sense because the 10 Commandments as repeated in Deuteronomy are basically as Moses retells it to the Jewish people. He's like, guys, remember when we stood at Sinai and God said, and then he says the 10 Commandments again. So that's kind of like, it's in quotation marks, hence the repetition. But anyway, yeah, that would be another iteration. And potential, but not exactly.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Good. Ray, I see you jumped on. Good to see you. Yes, Amy. Oh, Amy, question? No. Just saying hi? Good. All right, awesome. Questions? Good. Thank you very much. Good to see you guys. Laila Tov. By the way, for whoever signed joining us for the for the UV the Judge class, we have that tomorrow, 12 noon and 7:30. If you're not yet signed up, it is phenomenal. Jump in on it. It is a lot of fun. You can always check it out. Reach out to me, text, call, email for more information, and we will get you in on that action tomorrow at 12 or 7:30 p.m. Or you can do both. But I always say, if you want to do both, then you're teaching 7:30. All right. We'll see you guys. Anastasia, great to see you. Great to see you. Pleasure. Ray, Jackie, Kay, Sam. Excellent. See you.